Now, I'm joined in the studio by Angus Hanton, the author of a new book, hopefully you can see that, Vassal State, which analyses the historic relationship between the UK and the US. Angus, thanks for coming in this morning.
Thanks.
It seems to me that you're suggesting perhaps that this so-called special relationship between Britain and America is actually quite parasitic, and you're describing Britain as the 51st state, which sort of takes me back a little bit to Tony Blair being described as George W. Bush's poodle.
Well, it's almost worse than that. Perhaps we'd be better off if we were the 51st state. We don't have the status that a state has. And it's not about really the historical relationship, it's about the current relationship.
Yes.
It turns out that what people often call a special relationship has become a very abusive relationship, whether it's in terms of trade or the fact that Britain follows American foreign policy, as you say, a bit like a poodle. But it's all based on the fact that America owns so much of what happens in Britain. There are 1,200 multinationals operating in the UK, and their combined turnover is $700 billion a year. That's equivalent on a per household basis to about £20,000 per household.
Yes.
So there's so much that we don't realise is actually owned by America.
Also, actually, this is a point that was made to me by economists last week, you know, how much of our pensions are indexed at the moment to the so-called Big Seven, and can we continue to ride this wave on the back of the Facebooks and the X's and the rest of it? I mean, you know, that might not be the case in 20 to 30 years' time. Absolutely.
We're very dependent on them in all sorts of ways. And when you go into a supermarket, most of the big brands you come across are American-owned. They dominate the supermarkets. In fact, they own some of the supermarkets. They own Morrison's, for example.
I've just brought over Peter Hitchens' column this morning in the Mail on Sunday, because there's a funny line in it. I mean, I thought it was funny, but maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. There were immediate sad cries of, what about the special relationship? But as I keep telling you, there's no such thing. We matter to the Americans slightly more than Bulgaria and much less than Ireland.
Well, what I found in the book was a retired worker for the American government, and he said we were under instructions to mention the special relationship as often as we could when the Brits were around, but when we were on our own, we laughed behind their backs. So the special relationship is something that works for them. There was an interview with Jane Hartley, the US ambassador, recently, and she mentioned the special relationship 20 times in that interview.
Right.
But it's special for them. To some extent, also, we provide a cover for them. When they're doing what they want to do in the world, it's mentioned that Britain is there too.
I know, but then I suppose the counter-argument to this is obviously our relationship with America is important in the world. I mean, they're a global superpower. And also, I suppose, if you look at sort of life in the UK after the Second World War and after the fall of the Soviet Union and all the rest of it, who else were we going to align ourselves with?
Well, we were aligned with Europe.
Is there a little bit of Remainer sympathy in this?
There is a bit of Remainer.
Be honest. You can be honest on GBNews. We take all views here.
There absolutely is some Remainer sympathy, but there's also the view that if we do relate to America, we should do it more as equals and less as a servant. And it's really costly to Britain.
But you don't want us to be aligning ourselves with Olaf Scholz right now, do you?
What I want is to be more independent. So what we're doing by aligning with America is we're making ourselves dependent on what they want. We're also impoverishing ourselves so that a lot of... Britain now, you don't feel it in London because London is quite a wealthy place by comparison, but taking the whole country, Britain now is about the same level of wealth as the poorest US state, Mississippi.
Yeah.
So we're poorer, a lot of talented people and go over to the States, so they take our people.
I know, but then you could argue that might be because, you know, we didn't pursue sort of fracking and self-sufficient energy. And secondly, you could say, well, America has historically enjoyed much lower tax rates because they don't have to fund an NHS.
Well, they certainly enjoy lower tax rates when they trade here. One of the things the multinationals do is pay very little tax, and the government could do something about that, and probably should. What they've been forced into is a situation where the sort of global tax rate is going to be 15%. And you may be pleased that that's a apparently low rate, but on the other hand, that's much lower than ordinary UK corporations pay, and small businesses pay. So,
very quick question, as we are running fast out of time. It's been one of those shows this morning, Angus, I'm sorry. Trump, how does his potential re-election as US president change this dynamic, if at all? Does it make it worse?
I don't think it'll make it worse or better. I think the thing is, whichever president is there puts America first. I mean, Trump's slogan, America First, is also Biden's slogan.
Yes.
So I think it's America First at the cost of Britain, and we should do something about it, and we can.
All right, well, if we want to know more about this, Vassal State, here's the book. It's by Angus. It sounds intriguing, to say the very least. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.